Hello, everyone, and welcome to Moxie Bets presented by Caesar Sportsbook. I'm your host, Katie Mox. Coming up on today's show, we have a very special guest, Aaron Nagler, co-founder of Cheesehead TV and Packers Insider, who will be getting into all of the weeds on what's happening with the Packers. We'll also get his take on Aaron Rodgers and all of that trade saga, what this means for Green Bay's futures. And how are these former Packers going to do with the Jets? Aaron is also going to weigh in on how Aaron Rodgers and Lazard futures may look in New York. So without further ado, let's welcome him in, our very special guest from Cheesehead TV, Aaron Nagler. Nags, thanks for coming on.
Katie, how the hell are you? Thanks so much for having me.
Uh, I'm a good, so I'm good. You had wrote me too about Jimmy Garoppolo being like, oh, you got to get over it, Mox, and you have you have a much
Right.
bigger fish to fry. You got to
A
get
little bit.
over Aaron
A little bit.
Rodgers. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. As you know, part of the fan base who was ready to turn the page last year. Um,
Yeah,
I'm I'm excited that the Packers are now doing so. I understand why they kind of stuck with Rodgers for another year, but I think there's a lot of Packers fans like myself who felt the time was now, and it made a lot of sense. And as for Aaron's contributions to the franchise and the organization and everything he's done on the field and his greatness, we'll always be grateful for that. Clearly, obviously, yeah,
yeah.
you do sense a closing of a pretty momentous chapter in Packers history, no doubt about it. But definitely excited for the future and what comes next with Jordan Love.
Yeah, we're going to get into that. But I want to talk to you about your career as well, because I'm sure you hear it all the time. There's not many people that get to work in sports, right? Like we do. But you get to work it even cooler because you get to work with the childhood team that you've
Right.
loved your entire life and you have created a living doing this. Now, I know you started in the arts, you started
Hmm.
acting, and then you kind
Right.
of went the sports writer route. So,
Mhm.
kind of talk to me about your journey and how you've come to be the co founder of Cheesehead TV.
Well, I met my co-founder at school. We were both actors. We went to school for acting at North Carolina School of the Arts. Corey Banke and myself were rabid Packers fans. We both moved to New
Mhm.
York to be actors, and we were actors. But life happens, and things kind of veer off course sometimes, and that's what happened. And eventually, I found myself in a cubicle job with two young children at
Oof.
home, and I needed to make some money. So I was working a 9 to 5er, but the whole time I kind of started blogging about football, and Corey had the idea because we used to just talk on the phone all the time and just argue about the Packers for hours. And he said, we should do a podcast. And I said, what's a podcast? Because this is like
Mhm.
2006, 2007. No one was doing podcasts back then. So he said, no, 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 you keep writing. We'll do a podcast. We'll put it all together. We'll make it a website. And you already had the name. He said, we'll call it Cheesehead TV. And it was legit a year, I think, before Twitter started, before social media really took off. So we were kind of in the right place at the right time. In the early days, we were very much, and it still is our mantra, devoted to Packers fans worldwide. And we really tried to push that.
Yeah,
We heard from a lot of service people around the world, people stationed in Germany or South Korea
yeah.
or wherever. And they were like, this is exactly what I've been looking for as far as like a community
Wow.
where Packers fans could get together and talk about the team and share their passion. Because back then, there really wasn't a whole lot. It was basically reprinted articles from the paper on the paper's website, and that was it.
Right.
So, we kind of formed a little community, and it has grown over the years. And like you said, I've made it into my career, and I do have to pinch myself sometimes. It is still work. I will make
Yes.
sure that everybody knows this. It's
Yes.
not all
Yes.
rainbows and sunshine. One of my
Uh-huh.
friends likes to say, "Oh, you just drink beer and watch football for a living," and I'm like, "Well, that's an aspect of it, sure, but that's not all I
Yeah.
do."
No, of course not. There is so much work and so much more work, being in sports than I would have ever anticipated kind of looking at it from the outside because it does look like it's just fun and you get
Oh, you're
to
just
watch
hanging
football
out,
all
right?
day, but
See, but what they
yeah,
don't
but it's
what they don't realize is that then you are beholden to this decision about Aaron Rodgers and whatever the trade is gonna go down, and I'm living out of my apartment for, like, a week and a half waiting for this freaking announcement that kinda comes when
Oh,
he's on McAfee, but we're still waiting for the actual trade to happen. So, yeah, that's kind of the news aspect of it, right? That I think a lot of people on
right.
the outside kind of don't think about it for obvious reasons, but it is very
Yeah.
real, and you are kind of waiting and sitting around and beholden to whatever actions the club takes, the player takes, and things like that.
Yeah, not even that though, but the hours of working in sports, right? Especially you and
Oh,
I here
sure.
on the East Coast.
Right.
Sometimes these games aren't over until midnight, or if you're watching basketball, if you're watching the Bucks, they might not start until 10:30
Yep.
at night. So you're up really late. There's no holidays that you get off, right? Because sports are happening
Well, especially
year
now that they're
round.
putting the Packers on Christmas 2 years in a row. Thanks for that. Yeah, no doubt.
Oh,
No, there's no off days. But again, I
it's the
mean, it's
best.
still better
It
than
is the best.
a lot of the other gigs I've had growing up. So
I would
I can't
agree.
complain.
What is your all-time favorite Packers memory?
Oh man, that's a really good one. I would say
There's a lot.
yeah, there it does encompass a
Yeah.
lot. In person, there's 2 of them. It's funny because people always ask, how long have you been a Packers fan, what have you. My earliest memory in my life is uh, being taken to Lambeau Field by my grandfather who had season tickets when I was 3 years old. And it's just, I have kind of pictures in my head and I do remember the
Yeah.
day. So that's my earliest memory. Probably my favorite memory of being in Lambeau as a
Yeah.
Packers fan was when Desmond Bishop picked off Brett Favre in his second year as a Viking, and we beat the Vikings that day, and it was such a celebratory moment. It was kind of like cathartic. Obviously, there's been lots of others as far as big moments in Packers history, whether it's Brett
Yeah.
and the gang winning that Super Bowl in '96 or the Super Bowl in 2010 with Aaron. But as far as like in person, that's probably my
Yeah.
favorite moment, just because it was such a communal, like cathartic moment of finally getting past Brett Favre and everything that
Yeah.
drama and that saga had meant and kind of tore apart the Packer fan base. It was just it was a big, big, big relief.
I'll tell you what, my favorite Packers memory is. It
Oh
was the
God.
2019 NFC
Right. You're
Championship game
hilarious,
at
Mox.
Levi Stadium. It was a really beautiful moment for me and my
Oh, you mean
family,
it wasn't
Nag.
when Jerry Rice fumbled? Oh, you mean it wasn't when the Packers would go to
Oh,
Candlestick and
you
whoop up
know,
on them in the 90s? Oh, all right.
it
I
it
feel it.
it oddly, it wasn't. Oddly, it wasn't. It was much later in 2019.
Right.
Caesars Sportsbook, it's not just an app, it's a whole empire. Iconic casinos, hotels, world class restaurants. It's all yours with Caesars Rewards. Because every bet you place, win or lose, earns reward credits, which you can redeem for hotel stays at over 50 destinations, meals, tickets, merch, bonuses, and more. Get started today. Create an account with promo code OMAHA FULL. All right, so let's get right into the juice of this. And you've already talked about. Normally, this section is called Capper's Corner. I have changed the name to be Packer's Corner
Got it.
because you are on with us. So, Aaron Rodgers gave this interview. I was one of, and look, you do this obviously for your job, but I was one of the, what, 500,000 suckers that tuned into this to hear. Yeah,
Right.
you might as well just tattoo sucker on my forehead at this point.
Right.
But I was tuned in. I had it on the big screen on my TV, and it was the most self indulgent episode I think I had ever listened to. Now,
Right.
part of me is like, what did you expect that you were going to get? This is Aaron Rodgers, but you already alluded to it. And I know where you stand in kind of a relief that it is at least in the process of happening. Aaron Rodgers says his intention is to play for the Jets. What is the overall vibe with Cheesehead Nation?
Yeah, I think the majority of the fan base is relieved that there's some movement, right? It's
Yeah.
actually kind of moving forward. And I do think the majority of fans, and I'm clearly not speaking for every fan. It's not even the majority, I would think, of every single kind of nook and cranny of Packer fandom. But the kind of response I've gotten, both in my mentions on Twitter and in my inbox and comments on my YouTube channel, it's very much like Packers fans are relieved to be moving forward and understand that it's time, and it's
Yeah.
not a sense of that's a slight towards Aaron. It's just the team has continually butted its head up against this wall in the playoffs, year after year
Hmm.
after year, especially
Hmm.
even after going all in and signing some of these guys to contract extensions and pushing money back and out and trying to like play chicken with the cap a little bit, trying to get back to a Super Bowl with Aaron, and it just hasn't happened. And so I think for the most part, after 3, 4 years of this, Packers fans
Yeah.
are ready. Especially, of course, they drafted Jordan Love. We've seen him
Hmm.
improve every year, every
Yeah.
single year since he's been drafted. He's improved on the football field, and I think the time is right. So, more than anything, I think people are appreciative of what Aaron has done, but they're ready to move on. But that, and again, it's not all Packers fans because there is certainly I would probably say
Yes.
a minority, but there's certainly a vocal group of Packers fans who think it's ridiculous that they're trading Aaron, and they can't
Yeah.
understand why they're not just kind of doing basically what the Saints did, right? Like try to make every last possible chance with Aaron work until it's inevitable and his arm is about ready to fall off, and we're just going to kind of
Right.
squeeze every bit of juice out of it that you can. Which, look, I think that's a valid kind of viewpoint, and I understand, especially how diehard Rodgers fans can think that way. But I think from an
Yeah.
organizational standpoint, and if you're the Packers, I think they're making the right call.
Right. Yeah, just to dip your toe in 49ers quarterback controversy. Okay, the
Hmm.
fans are split on that one as well. I was surprised to hear Aaron Rodgers say that he was 90% going to retire before he went into this darkness retreat. Now, I for one don't believe this at all. And
Right,
then he tried to
right.
kind of spin it and say that
Yeah.
then he came out of the darkness and, oh no, the Packers are shopping me
Shopping me
around. Well,
around, right?
I'm gonna go somewhere else now. It's like, okay. But I'm curious what you think. What kind of deal are the Packers going to put forward here for the Jets? Now, of course, reportedly the Jets want some kind of a Stafford deal, which this guy says he's 90% retired. You know you're only getting him for 1, maybe 2 years. You're not giving up 2 number ones.
Oh, no.
Realistically,
Yeah.
what do you think the Packers are gonna get?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned the 90% retired quote because I do wonder if that's kind of planted there to sow the seeds for the Jets to say, look,
Mm,
this guy could just up and retire next year, you know? So,
yeah,
of course, we're not going to give you a first round pick. And I think the fulcrum around which all of these kind of negotiations are probably swinging. And here's the other thing, we don't really know what's being talked about. I know Adam Schefter put out there kind of initially reporting that the Packers had been talking internally about several first rounders and things like that. I don't think that offer has ever been kind of put in front of the Jets. I think the fulcrum for this deal is the 13th overall pick, the Jets' first round pick. Understandably, I think the Packers want that pick. Also,
yeah,
understandably, I don't think the Jets have any interest in giving that up. I do
mhm,
think they are going to utilize the Jets. The fact that Rodgers is about to turn 40, he'll turn 40 during this season, and his kind of public, very public, ruminations on retirement. The last couple of years he's talked about it, the 90% quote this year. I think they'll say, look, we're not giving up the 13th overall pick, which is basically 5 years of control on a young player for a guy who's going to give us a Super Bowl window, supposedly, presumably,
yeah,
for a year and maybe two if we're lucky. Now, here's what's
right,
crazy. Here's what's nuts. It wouldn't surprise me if Aaron Rodgers played another 5 years. It wouldn't
yeah,
surprise me at all. Now, I don't
same,
think that's going to happen, but it wouldn't surprise me. So I think these are all things they're going to talk about. I suspect at the end of the day, most likely they'll get probably the Jets' second round pick this season and then some
mhm.
kind of conditional pick in 2024. And look, here's the problem is this can probably drag on until the draft because that's the first real pressure point for either side to get a deal done.
Well, and it's like if I were the Packers, I'd be like, "Look, I'm gonna go into a darkness retreat, and then I'll let you know
Right.
when when I feel like
Yeah.
telling you, Aaron Rodgers, because he
Right.
kinda dragged this out with them for so long
Yep.
that I wouldn't be in a rush to do anything for
Yeah.
him necessarily.
And if you're the
Now this
Packers,
wish
you want comp this year. That's the trick, right? And
Yes,
that's why the draft really is the first kind of point where someone's got to blink because if it gets past the draft, the Packers will just wait until June because they can spread out
yeah.
this cap hit after the June 1st kind of designation, the June 1st release. That helps them from a cap perspective. So I think, yeah, the April 27th, I believe, is the date I have circled for put up or shut up time for these two
That's
organizations.
what you're beholden to April
That's
27th
the
now.
one. Yep.
We've got through one, we're going to the
I
other
know
one. Now
exactly.
this Aaron Rodgers wish list. Now he said it was ridiculous, which it's not ridiculous because it's already happening. Obviously, Allen
Right.
Lazard
Right.
has $44 million deal now with the Jets. Randall Cobb also in the mix here, along with OBJ and some other people. Curious how you feel as Packers fans about him kind of also now taking, your wide receivers
Right.
as well. And I've heard some pushback on social media being like every quarterback does this. Tom Brady did. It's like, yeah, but Tom Brady agreed to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers first
Right.
and then started bringing in some people from retirement or wherever. This feels a little different. Are you salty about it a little bit? Or is it like, hey,
No.
he's getting his friends paid or a little bit
Yeah,
of
I mean, a
both?
little bit of that, but no, there's definitely not salty about it. I think it makes all the sense in the world. Peyton Manning did the same thing when he went to Denver, as far as here's a list of guys that I think could really help us and that I like and I'm
Yeah.
comfortable with. And I just think it makes all the sense in the world. And I buy what Aaron was saying on McAfee in the sense that he probably didn't make a list. I mean, I don't know, but he probably didn't make a list. They probably said,
Yeah.
how do you feel about this guy? How do you feel about that guy? And he was like, yeah, I really like that guy being Allen Lazard or Randall Cobb or Big Dog or whoever. But as far as like losing them, I don't think Packers fans are under any illusions that, again, talking about butting your head up against the wall as an organization and repeatedly kind of coming up short. Well, those guys have all been part of it. You know what I mean? So it's not like losing Allen Lazard is this great step backwards for the Packers. I think he's a really good receiver. I think the Jets fans are absolutely going to love him. He does all the down and dirty stuff, but he's also, on the same page with Rodgers. Those guys can play together in their sleep. I think if they get Randall Cobb, same kind of thing. And I also don't think
Mhm.
that, I've seen some pushback from Jets Twitter about, oh, they're going to be taking the place of or playing ahead of some of these young, talented guys in New York. I don't think that's necessarily the case, especially when it comes to Randall
Right.
Cobb. But I do think you've got a 4-time MVP. He's got the guys he
Mhm.
trusts and likes, if for no other reason, to have those guys in the building to help kind of shepherd
Yes.
along these younger guys. I think that was really smart of the Jets to go that route.
I agree 100%, especially because they have a short window with him, 1 or 2
Exactly.
years, and it takes time for
You wanna get up and
quarterbacks to get
running
up to
week 1.
speed.
You don't wanna wait till, like, week 8 for things to gel. Exactly.
Exactly, so at least you have those, like, safety nets in place, and then, as the season goes on, it's gonna open up for some of those young guys. So, okay, you are optimistic about Jordan Love, and you said he's been improving, but okay, Lazard is gone, maybe Cobb is going to be gone, so we need some wide receivers to help with Jordan Love, and I did see that you
Right.
tweet out you've got a crush on Arkansas wide receiver Matt Landers. Who are you liking in the draft for the Packers?
Well, it's interesting because, they took 3 wide receivers last year, and I think there's a decent chance they dip into the wide receiver pool again this year. Landers is a guy who I really like. He's probably a day 3 guy, but he fits their athletic profile, like, as far as his height, weight, most of his athletic testing. I'll tell you what, I would not be surprised if this is a year where the Packers double dip at the tight end position. And I
Ooh, I
I
love a
wouldn't
tight end.
and I wouldn't, presume to sit here and tell you, well, these are the guys they're going to look at. But I do love Kincaid. I love the fact that you can
Mhm.
put it anywhere in his vicinity, and he's going to catch the ball. I know Daniel Jeremiah had him going to the Packers with one of his mock drafts at 15. That would really surprise me. The Packers traditionally haven't kind of gone that route in the draft. However, last year you had them take an off-ball linebacker with their first round pick, and that hasn't
Yeah,
happened in ages.
last year
So
was weird.
you never really know with Gutekunst. He is certainly proven to go against profile more than Ted Thompson ever did. But yeah, I think pass catchers more so than just wide receivers. You could
Yeah.
could even be a running back on day 3, some third down shifty back type guy. Names in particular, like I said, I love Kincaid. I do love a couple of guys that I just think after taking 3 wide receivers last year, there's probably a better chance that they dip their toe into free agency, somebody on a 1-year deal, much like they did with Sammy Watkins last year. Hopefully, they have better luck this time around, but, yeah, again, I wouldn't completely preclude them from taking a wide receiver this year, but I think it'll be on day 3.
Okay, day 3, I'm gonna write that down when I start making my, draft bets,
Right.
Packers day 3, pass catcher. Okay, so let's look at some of these futures for both the Packers and also former Packers now potentially on the
Mhm.
Jets. So you reigned the kings of the North for a very long time. And if we look at the odds for this next season, you are last in the odds. You got the Detroit Lions, who've made a lot of really great moves in this free agency so far, plus 155, the Vikings plus 290, Bears plus 300, and then the Packers at plus 425. How do you feel about this? And how do you think that you'll fare in the division this year?
I think it makes all the sense in the world sitting here in mid-March, right? Um,
Yes.
Talk to me again in the summer, talk to me in August, but right now,
Yeah.
look, I understand why that's the perception, and it's also attempt to get people to move. But I think they're going to surprise a lot of people. The Packers. I think it makes a world of sense for them to be looking up in the offseason. I do think when push comes to shove, I expect them to compete for a wild card spot. I don't know. I know winning the division
Yeah.
is going to be tough. I do think Detroit is ascending, right? There's no doubt about it. But they certainly show that
Oh,
they can go toe to toe with the Vikings, and they've owned the
hmm.
Bears forever. And I don't think losing Aaron Rodgers, even though he has owned them, I think they're going to, they'll be competitive against both of those teams. Detroit has shown though they are a tough out for Matt LaFleur.
Yes.
Even when they were winning. I remember I think it was the first year he was in town. They were losing both games until the final whistle, until the final second of both games. It's like you go back to this season, and that's a really fundamentally sound, tough football team that executes at a much higher level than Green Bay does. Now, will changing quarterbacks maybe change the approach on offense a little bit? Will that help them out? Possibly. But I think Detroit's a tough out for Green Bay. Just the way they match up. Yeah, I do suspect they're going to have a tough time with Detroit yet again in 2023.
I think so too. And the Detroit is such a frisky team, and they surprised me last year, and they've just been loading up that
Oh, they've done a
I'm a
really
little
good
bit
job,
worried about them.
especially, yeah, the defense, getting the kind of the
Yeah.
back end addressed. Although it does seem like Detroit does that almost every other offseason or so, just because they need so much
Yeah.
help. But yeah, I've liked their offseason, no doubt about it. And like I said, that's a team, and a
Mhm.
coaching staff that has given the Packers some trouble.
Yeah, so I mean, look at plus 425, maybe a little sprinkle on the Packers to win the division isn't a bad bet because, like you said, as this moves forward in the summer or even in season, we could see these odds drop. So it might be,
No doubt.
if you're feeling like the Packers are being kind of underrated right now, plus 425 might not be a bad bet. So this is a fun one. So there's not a lot of futures that are out right yet, right? We're still in free agency. The draft
Right.
hasn't happened, but with all this news of Aaron Rodgers, some books have popped up some fun ones. So here's one for the Jets to miss the playoffs and the Packers to make the playoffs. That's
I
a
saw
plus
that.
350. What do you think?
That's a tough one. That's a real tough one. I
Yeah.
can't say I'm on board with that, just because I think you do. Hey, look, I buy what the Jets are selling in regards to the fact that Aaron Rodgers makes them a contender. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I think the one area you look,
Spiteful Aaron Rodgers.
yeah, seriously, with a chip on his shoulder, which is always
Mhm.
how he's done his best work in the league. I do think the one area you want to watch for the Jets is the offensive line, right? They've got
Yeah.
to they've got to improve there. Probably they're hoping that 13th overall pick, they want to keep it because they want to take an offensive lineman. Um, but outside of that, this is a team that, yeah, you put Aaron Rodgers in there, they're gonna compete and they're gonna contend. For the Packers, like I said, I think it's a year where you have to step back with your expectations. No doubt you're
Mhm.
competing for the playoffs, but if there's a likelihood of one team getting into the postseason and one team not, it's certainly the other way around. It's certainly you
Yeah.
got to think the Jets have the much better chance than the Packers.
All right, so we're not taking that one at plus 350. Okay, so we look at Aaron Rodgers and some of his futures prop. Right now, his over and under for his total passing yards is set to 4,000 and a half. Both of those odds are at minus 112 for the over and the under. Now, he missed this last year, 3,695. He had 4,115 in 2021, and he really hasn't been below 4K since 2017 when he was injured with that collarbone. Is it a good bet? Do you think that Rodgers is gonna get over this 4,000 with the Jets?
God, I really struggle with this one. My hunch and total guess here is that I would take the under. I really would. And I don't think it's a
Really?
question of
Even if he
he's
gets
not going to have the
Lazard
opportunities.
and Cobb?
Yep, he's going to have his boys, but it's a defensive led team, right? Even with Aaron Rodgers, this defense is going to be lights out.
Yeah.
And I don't doubt for a moment that they're going to be in games where it's the fourth quarter and he's handing it off. And that's not to say that
Mhm.
Aaron's not going to try and get his. Like of course he will. But
Yes.
I just get the idea of the style of play. Saleh is the head coach. Yeah, Hackett's there, but and that's not. And again, I think he's going to be productive, and I think he's going to lead them to a lot of victories. My sense would be, especially with the kind of the need to kind of get into this flow offensively. I think it's going to take a little bit. I don't think he comes out of the gate, 300 yards per game, three touchdowns, etc.
Yeah.
I think it's going to take time to work up to that. And that's not.
Yeah.
Again, I think he's going to be really good. I would just go just under on this one.
All right, well, what about his actual passing touchdowns? That's set to 29 and a half. He only had 26 last year, but last year was kind of a down year
Big time.
for his touchdowns, his throwing touchdowns, both minus 112. You going over or under this 29 and a half?
This one I'm going over. I think
Okay.
the most success he's had in recent vintage was with Hackett in the building, drawing up the red zone plays. Hackett, obviously he's reuniting with him as offensive coordinator. There's little doubt in my mind when they're inside the 5, Aaron's going to be looking to throw and not to hand it off. I think there's little doubt that, like you said, the Packers were awful in the red zone last year. I mean, one of the worst seasons in memory in that regard. I don't think that was on Aaron. I think there were a lot of other
Yeah.
factors. And I do think I fully expect him to bounce back touchdown pass wise in 2023.
What are your thoughts on Nathaniel Hackett? Because he was not good as a head coach
No, no,
in
he was
in
not.
Denver
No. Hey,
at
some
all.
guys aren't. Some guys aren't,
Yeah.
right? Some guys are just not built for it, or just people don't respond. It was a very weird situation with Russell Wilson coming in, being handed this monster
Yeah.
contract. It's real hard to
Hmm.
assert yourself as a head coach when it's so very clear that that is the face of the franchise. That is the voice that is being listened to, and you're kind of secondary, right? All of
Yeah.
that said, no, his game day management was bad and the offense was impossible to
Clock
watch at
management.
times. Clock
Yeah.
management was terrible. Like they're all of that. But man, sometimes people are just coordinators, and that's fine. And I think
Right.
Nathaniel has a chance to be a really good one. I think,
Yeah.
I know people dismiss the work he did down in Jacksonville. He was a scapegoat ultimately in that situation, but I think that year where they made the AFC Championship game, they ended against the Patriots. I thought he did some really nice work there. Uh, and I think in Green Bay, like I said, Rodgers absolutely loves the guy, and I know
Yeah.
he's very happy to be reuniting with him. I think he's going to do a really good job. I think he's going to help unlock some stuff that obviously New York has struggled offensively, especially at quarterback, and I think Hackett's going to be a big piece to Rodgers, obviously coming, but also producing in the Jets offense.
Yeah, and I feel like at least the perception is that Rogers doesn't like everybody. So if you are on the good
Yeah,
side of him,
I can't imagine why that perception's out there, but yeah, that does
why that
seem to
is.
get bandied about a little bit, doesn't it?
And you talk about too, people that are just meant to be coordinators. It seems like Denver has a hard time with hiring coordinators that should just be coordinators, because I feel the same thing about Vic Fangio. I think he was an incredible
Right,
defensive coordinator and was
100%.
not a very good head coach. So they
No,
were back to back with
and he was kind of
poor
yeah,
game
and he was
management.
way too old school. Not that the game has
Yeah,
passed him by, but the game is very different as far as how you relate to players and how you manage the game and things like that. And I do think some of these older coaches, it's a bit of a maybe not a wake up call, but it is a very different world, and that's why I think you've seen so many teams, start to hire the next generation. If you've got the Matt Lafleur's, Kevin O'Connell's, obviously, Sean McVay kind of led this charge, but I think that makes a lot of sense. So when you see a guy like Vic Fangio get a job, you're like, I'm not so sure.
yeah.
But to your point, I mean, one of the best defensive minds in the game still. I think he's going to really help this season down in Miami.
Yeah, well, and now finally Denver has Sean Payton, so I think their coaching woes are probably
You
over
would
with
think.
now. Okay,
You
let's
would
move
think.
on. You would hope. You would hope. For Allen Lazard, the vibes are high right now for Allen Lazard. His touchdown prop is at 10 plus
Yeah, I
for
saw
plus
that.
250. His career high was in 2021. That was only 8 touchdowns.
Yeah,
10 seems high to me. I don't know if I can ride this train.
totally agree with you. I can't go 10. I think look, he's gonna get touchdowns thrown to him, of course, because it's Aaron Rodgers, and
Mhm.
they have a really tight connection when it comes to the RPO game down in the red zone and kind of just the look at the line, where Aaron just kind of looks at him. He
Yeah.
doesn't even have to do anything else, and he knows exactly what to do. He threw a touchdown pass to Allen Lazard down in Tampa this past season that is just incredible as far as clearly the entire offense thinks it's going to be a run play, and Aaron and Allen are on the same page for a touchdown. I think we're going to see a number of those, but I still can't get with 10. I think that's real rich. As you say, he's never gone above 8. And look, last year they were desperate to score touchdowns and do stuff in the red zone, and he still couldn't sniff it. So yeah, I with all the other kind of avenues to score in this Jets offense with the weapons that he's going to have at his disposal, I'd be surprised if he hit 10.
He's not gonna have the best year of his life, with the new offense and all of the things. I agree with you 100%. All right, Aaron, thank you so much for joining us today. You can follow Aaron at Aaron Nagler on Twitter, and obviously tune into everything Cheesehead TV. Anything that you want to plug that's going on this week, Aaron?
Just we have a live show tonight with a group of Packers fans who grew up with Aaron Rodgers as their quarterback. They're going to look back at the end of an era. It's going to be a lot of fun on the Cheesehead TV
Oh.
YouTube channel. You should definitely check that out because, gosh knows, I'm an old man. I grew up with Brett as my QB, but these folks grew up with Aaron. I think for them, it's a very big moment, right? That idea of
Yeah,
like your guy moving on. I get it. I get it. So that's going to
sad.
be going live tonight on the YouTube channel for Cheesehead
What time is that?
TV. 7 p.m. Eastern.
7 p.m. Eastern. I'm gonna tune into that. I thought that you guys did a really beautiful kind of send-off video for him too. I really
Oh, thank you.
appreciated that.
Yeah, thank
It
you so
was,
much.
yeah, that was wonderful. Because on Twitter is so toxic and volatile that you see
Yeah.
all this hate, and so it was nice to say, "Hey, thank you for the memories. Thank you for everything that you've done for us. Thank you for bringing a winning culture." Not that obviously in Titletown there was a lack of a winning culture, but still, you didn't know how it was
You
going to go, and it
maintained
went
it.
from far.
Exactly. Exactly.
Maintained it, which
100%.
was a fear going into it. But all right, Aaron, thank you so much. You are the best. This has been Moxie Bets presented by Caesar Sportsbook. Don't forget to follow us on social at Moxie Bets, and we'll see you next time.